Hi, welcome to another edition of WCM's Outdoor Hospitality Update, and I'm your host, Ben Quiggle, editor of Woodall's Campground magazine, and of course, my esteemed colleague and co-host, Mike Gast, who's still in Hawaii, but the countdown to when he hits the mainland is
we're under 90 days now. It's just kind of, it's euphoric and yet makes us a little sick, so we're about ready to do our farewell tour here pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, I think the mainland will be better when you're on it, Mike.
That's kind to say.
We'll look forward to your arrival in Nebraska. So from Hawaii to Nebraska, that's a pretty big change.
Yeah, I think it's one spot. It's one spot in the earth that's farthest away from the ocean. So I don't know why we picked. Well, I know why we picked that. We have a grandbaby coming, so
yeah,
we're headed to Nebraska to take that in.
Well, that'll be cool. And our guests today are Billy McNamara. I think I said that right. From Billy, just tell us what campground you're from, because there's
Loons Haven. It's okay. Loons Haven Family Campground in Naples, Maine.
And you work with Scott Bahr, who's our other guest, with Cairn Consulting Group too, right, Billy?
Yes. As
and
much as
and of course, Scott is president of Cairn Consulting Group. Is it Cairn or Cairn?
I say Cairn, but my Scottish friends say that it should be pronounced Cairn. So
yeah, with the name of Karen lately, I think you want to go with Cairn anyway.
We'll go with Cairn.
Karen Consulting is a whole different thing. That just means you stand in the corner and yell at people.
A whole new line of business.
And of course, Scott and Billy have been on the show before, and they're great with numbers. And that's why we brought them on this time, because we wanted to talk about their recent survey, the Campground Owner and Manager Survey, which they released at the beginning of August. We couldn't get you guys on the show until now. So, but it's great to have you guys on. I guess, the survey was great. I guess, what was your experience, Scott, just putting this together? What did you guys want to accomplish with the survey? Do you feel like you accomplished it, I guess?
I do, because one of the things we wanted to do is something unique that the industry hadn't really done yet, and look at some of the different measurements that weren't a part of some other industry-based surveys, and using Billy's knowledge of campgrounds and kind of what the needs and what are the gaps. So we looked at not only the gaps in information that we felt needed a solution, but also using Billy's expertise to identify the areas that would be most meaningful to campground owners and managers.
Yeah, Billy, you mentioned this survey to me at the Northeast Campground Association conference last spring. And I guess, what were some of the things that you were excited about with the survey? What are some, were you able to tackle all the data points that you wanted to tackle, and were you pretty excited with it, I guess?
Oh, very excited. And the things that, I was looking to do, and my big thing that I like to do anything in the industry is helping people and, communication and collaboration. And I think by this opened up a door for everyone to do those things. And so the information that we got was, a lot of it was, we kind of knew these things, but there were some other things that we're very surprised by. And it got us more excited about the future and what this could bring and how this could help campgrounds, from the smaller ones to the larger ones, and what they're looking for and what they need.
Yeah. And there's just so much data going through the outdoor hospitality industry right now. With KOA survey report, they do a monthly report now, which is just incredible. And then they do their annual report, and a National Association of RV Parks and Campgrounds has a report that they do for its members every year. And then I think about every single company, like RV Share, The Dirt, CampSpot, there's probably more, there are a lot more I'm missing. They've all come out with data and like statistics. I guess Scott, what's your thought on just all this data? I mean, I think when I started with Woodall's years ago, there was just nothing. And now it just seems like there's just a flood of information, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, as Mike can attest to, because he was there and a part of it.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything
Responsible.
there, and that was part of the genesis of the original North American Camping Report. That there was this gap. I remember having the conversations with the folks at KOA, and people would ask, "It's like, how many people really camp? Do we really know?
Yeah.
What are they camping in? Do we really know how that all falls out?" So, my view on what's going on right now, to just fast forward through all that, is, as a researcher, it's great. The more information you have, the better. It's most people are doing stuff that serves them and their interests. My challenge to the industry overall would be for people to find, as was our goal with this project, what the areas that still need measurement in are needed, so that we can avoid duplication of effort. I really like it when someone builds on something that someone else has done. That's the kind of collaboration, and that's the kind of information that people need. The last thing we want people doing, in my mind anyway, is for people to start comparing a certain question or a certain measure from one study to another, because that doesn't, that's somewhat of a disservice to the industry, and actually to the people involved as well. So again, I would really like to see there be much more, a little bit more collaboration, a little bit more kind of considering what's out there and where can we kind of fill that gap if we're doing it indeed to benefit the industry versus a company doing their own internal work.
Another thing that's changed over time, I think, is when we started the North American Camper Report back in 2014 and came out with that first set of data, there was a lot of disbelief, I think, in the industry. There was a lot of folks that just didn't really take what was in there and say, yep, that's exactly what's going on. I mean, it was a window into not just what was going on, but what was going to happen. And I think over time, that every year that thing kind of bore out. I mean, that what we said was going to happen or what the trends were continued. And I think it got a lot of people's attention that way. And I think people have wrapped their arms around data now. We don't have to try so hard to make them believe it when they see what these reports are saying. Do you agree with that, Scott?
Yes, yeah, I do. The consumer of research, most businesses are much more sophisticated now than they were even just a few years ago. We're a lot better at what we do than we used to be. It's the tools we have for doing research, all those things, we make it a lot easier for people to access and digest that. And again, the more the information is out there and the more the publications push that information out, that content, the more they digest it and understand and learn how to apply that information to their own situation.
So we used to spend a lot of time on the top line for the North American Camper Report. What's the top line for this latest research you've done?
Billy, do you want to take a shot at that?
I think the biggest.
Knows more about
here. I'll pop the report up here on the screen as Billy talks. So
I think the biggest thing is, like Scott said, we were asking different questions than a lot of these other surveys were doing, and we're trying to get into the actual procedures or the actual way that people run their parks and where they need help. So the biggest things that we found is like, do they need marketing help? Do they need help with employees? Do they need help with policies and procedures? And I think what the results show and how this helps people too is that they can see they're not the only ones that are running into these kind of issues. And with these big reports, like Mike, you talk about the KOA report, which is amazing. It is a lot of information, and some people might just skim through it and say, hey, this doesn't really apply to me. And that's the cool thing about data. Not everything does apply to you, but it's information you can take and learn and grow your campground. And so something like what Ben has up here is we did ask, how big is your park? Because that goes a lot into it. If you have a smaller park or you have a mid-sized park or you have a large park, and how you do things changes. So by asking those questions helps to get the data out and say, well, smaller parks are having this specific issue, or medium-sized parks are having this specific issue, or maybe it's across the board on everything. And then, you get into like what opportunities we can get from the data that we obtained, which any of these reports, like Ben, you talked about, the Dirt, CampSpot, they have some really great reports of information they gathered. And you can take all of this data, and yeah, sometimes it does take working through and picking and choosing what you need or what you don't need, but it gives really great information.
I agree. And in terms of those differences, I think were, to me, just from my perspective as a non-campground manager and owner too, is that you can really clearly see that the smaller campgrounds have very different issues than the larger campgrounds. Whether it's text messaging or that the social media presence, they need some more resources to help them, but they don't really need the staffing. Whereas the large campgrounds need staffing and help with things like policies and procedures that didn't show up with even the mid-sized to small campgrounds. But what's consistent across all three is having the time to work on development. And I think that to me was like, oh, okay, there's one of the areas that campgrounds are really needing is opportunity for themselves to work on developing their campgrounds the way they want. Based on some of these other results in here, you can kind of see what those areas are.
Did you measure longevity in the questionnaire too, Scott? Do we know how long these folks have owned, and is that trending to be a shorter period now?
We did measure that, but we don't have a previous data point to compare it to right now. I would, if someone else knows that information, they can.
Yeah, we did ask the length of ownership, because I think that's going to be important data for the future. These people who have been in operation for 20 plus years versus people who are maybe just a few years under their belt, and where are they hitting problems, and where are the veterans hitting problems. So.
And then they also broke it out into regions.
Yes.
Which regions they're from, the roles of the people who took the survey. So you can see 73% of the people who took the survey were the actual owners, and then 26% were the managers. A lot of these are operational questions, though. So like, it's great to have an owner, but at some of these like corporate run parks or, those kind of parks, the manager is actually the one on the ground and knows the operational stuff, which you guys were asking in the survey. So I thought the development, having time to work on development was interesting, because we hear all the news about how the parks are filled. I think a lot of park owners are bringing in more money than maybe they have in the past, and you just assume that they're developing and having all adding to their parks and stuff. But then you read this, and it's just difficult for them to have the time to even plan out what that looks like, I guess. Is that kind of like what do you experience that at your park, Billy? I guess.
Yeah, I think a big thing too is, you brought up, we asked regions, so it depends on that too, because I'm in Maine, and so we only have a certain amount of time that we can do this work and do these improvements. And, we don't do a ton while we're open because we don't want to disturb the guests. We do what we can, but mostly it's on either side of when we open or close. But when snow starts flying, there's only so much we can do. And from my perspective at the park, we try to do as much as we can here, but we have to hire, contractors and vendors, and that's been really difficult. They're so busy that it's hard to get people in for that. So that, that disrupts our projects as well, which could be part of what these people are saying when not having time is, they just can't get people to come and help them do the work that they need to do.
Yep. And then you mentioned you show the impact of the new camper, that, what has it had on the campgrounds, the industry, and like the local economy in the area. You break that out. And I think one of the interesting parts that Scott mentioned when I was chatting with him for the story we did was the length of stays and the type of units people prefer. That was kind of interesting. You mentioned 6 out of 10 campground owners and managers would prefer a 4 to 7 night stay, which is well above their typical guest who stays only 2 to 3 nights. So it kind of makes sense that they would want longer stays, I guess, right?
It's less, on the staff when
Yeah.
you have things like that for sure, because you don't have check-ins, check-outs, site turnover.
When you go back 20 years, there was no such thing as housekeeping. There was that wasn't something that had to be done. And you had to mow the grass and empty the trash, but you really didn't have to go in there and clean a cabin.
Yeah.
You mentioned, how far out campers are typically booking and split that out depending on the campground. Some of the large campgrounds noted, more than a year out, 3 to 4 months out. So, I mean, people are planning their vacations a little bit more than kind of spur of the moment. Overall, only 3% were less than a week. So that's kind of interesting. It'll be interesting to see as time progresses how that changes. So
I know back in several years ago, doing this type of work with campers actually, and looking at, I think the first year we did the camping report, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but there was a much larger percentage of people who did just the walk-ins. And I know because people, especially the RVers, they just drive up, they'd be on the road. Oh, here, we'll just stop here because and they basically knew they could get a site. So we don't see that as much anymore.
yeah, I unfortunately, I mean, my wife and I are kind of like that. We do kind of spur of the moment or maybe like a day or two in advance, and it is getting more difficult for non-planners to find sites. So especially for like the holiday weekends, you have to plan way out for like 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day. You just have to plan to do something on those weekends months in advance in order to have a chance of getting a site normally. So it's just something I guess we have to adapt to.
So Billy, what did you see in the report that you're going to use on your campground?
I think some of the coolest things in there, looking at what the prospective camper is and what kind of camper that I want to have here, and the information that came up and seeing what different size parks and different regions, what they're looking for, will help me adjust, because where I'm at, we're kind of close to other things that happen. So during the summer, I'll have longer stays, but then in the off season on either side, I'll have the shorter stays. So like, how can I make it so that people want to stay longer at my park? And the information that came through that, looking at what other campgrounds have, then I can look and see, well, what are they doing? I can adjust that to my park and extend those stays out and get those weekday stays and not just the weekend stays.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really interesting. I think the typical is said on here. What are the typical and desired group compositions? 62% want couples with kids. So, and then 37% couples with no kids. So,
either or.
I think that's kind of interesting. I imagine that changes based on the region, because I imagine once you get down into like the southern states, they have a lot of snowbird parks down there. So I imagine they're looking for couples with no kids, probably more than couples with kids. So maybe not. I don't know.
The seasonality. Yeah. That's probably, I mean, and again, that goes to the whole idea of development. Development includes your marketing and developing your constituency. It's like, what are you looking for? Who are you looking for to bring in? And that was one of the things that was interesting about this, as Billy mentioned, that who am I attracting versus who would I like to have? And again, for parks, we see that as a challenge and an opportunity in terms of, when you're out there, when you're trying to market your park, who are you attracting, and what are you doing that can influence maybe the length of stay a little bit? Because that, again, as was mentioned, that takes a little bit of the heat off you, because you're not turning those sites over as much in the cabins or whatever. So it frees up, even if it's just a little bit of time for you, maybe, that you can work on some of the other stuff.
So you mentioned the longevity information you've got in there, but is there anything in there, Scott, that addresses intention, how much longer they're going to own the park, or what their sales intent is?
We did not ask that. That would be an item we would use in the next round. Thank you for that.
I like that. Yeah, that's a good idea. Be like, so do you like this industry, and do you want to
Well,
stay?
yeah,
Are you ready to
I think
sell?
that's a lot of what goes on here. What goes on in a campground, and the happiness of an owner is, how happy are you with this? And you see all sorts of things when business gets tough, and when business gets busy, their happiness goes down, and that we're in a perfect storm a little bit right now, because parks for sale aren't lasting very long still, and folks are also burning out because they've been so busy. So it'd be interesting to see what that trends out over time when you've got that sales intent coming out, because boy, somebody throws a comment up on Facebook right now on some of those sites, and there's a feeding frenzy amongst folks that are looking for parks to buy.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Mike, because I just had a conversation with Ali Rasmussen at the end of last week from Spacious Skies Campgrounds, and they just purchased 2 more parks and opened those. And she was telling me the exact same thing, because I was asking her if they were going to be purchasing any parks, and she said it kind of go ebbs and flows. Like, during the winter here, it kind of slows down a little bit because the campground owners get a break and they get refreshed, and they kind of forget about what July 4th weekend was like. And so they're less inclined to sell their parks. And then when they get closer to the season and they have to start doing stuff at the campgrounds, then they're like, oh, I don't know if I'm ready. And then that's when they tend to want to sell their parks. So that was kind of interesting.
There was nothing sadder at KOA is when the snowbird parks in Florida would start to empty in the spring, because a lot of those snowbirds happened to be KOA owners that were headed back north to run their parks. And there was a lot of tears shed because they may not be totally recharged yet. And they were heading back to the fray. And I just think it's just been really tough for these last few years to be a park owner. It's been a real challenge. And it goes, Billy knows far better than any of us what that was like. And it probably didn't take a lot to tip people over, that were kind of towards the end of it anyway. So yeah, that's obviously a trend worth watching too. What's been the reaction, Billy and Scott, to the report so far, just amongst the owners that you've talked to?
Don't all talk at once.
Yeah.
Just see, we're data people. We don't, we stay in the background more. And so when you have 2 of us in the same room, there's nothing gets said. So no, the feedback that I received personally was more along the lines of thanks. Thanks for doing this. There was some surprises, some non-surprises. But yeah, I heard from several people that because, by the way, whenever we do surveys, I always give out my personal email. It's one of the ways I keep in contact with people. I throw it out there for transparency. I also get a lot of really good information that way. But it's and sometimes I get a lot of advice too. So, but no, the people I heard from were they liked the questions. They felt like the questions were relevant. And that for me is very rewarding if we, and I have to give Billy the credit on this for really working on those questions that were relevant to the campground owners, because, sometimes we ask questions and, people will say, you kind of missed the mark on this. And I felt like, at least from their perspective, that there were gaps, of course. I think early on you asked if we got all the questions in that we wanted to. Well, that never happens, because if we did this in a vacuum, our questionnaires would be a book. So it's but we, I think what we tried to do is keep it focused, and they felt that it was relevant and for them, and that was very encouraging from our perspective.
Scott, I think you told me once there's data on how long you want to make the survey, right? There's only how long will people sit and fill out a survey?
Depends on the subject matter. If you survey campers and you keep it fairly engaging, you can keep them on for a long time, 12, 15 minutes, not a problem, no complaints. But if you're asking about healthcare, it's about 3 or 4 minutes max. You know, you know, it's like it depends on the topic, but camping and hospitality in general, people like talking about it, so we push them a little bit further. But no, typically you want to keep your surveys under 8 minutes. That's kind of the rule of thumb. In this day and age, 8 minutes is getting a little long now too. So many
And
people
you wouldn't believe how much data Scott could crank out of an 8-minute interview either. You haven't lived until you've spent a couple of months wading through data with Scott Bahr.
It's well, I don't know if that's on anyone's bucket list out there, but but hey, you know, I'm open.
It's an educational exercise. We'll just say that.
He's collecting all of this data for his future New York Times best-selling book that he's going to write down the road. So, right, Scott?
It's probably not going to be about data. It's going to be about all the people he's dealt with. And
chapter in their bed. Yeah.
So what's the future hold for the report, Scott and Billy? Are we going to see this annually? Is this going to be a biannual thing? What's the plan?
From our perspective, we'd like to run it at least once a year. And I think that, you know, looking forward, you know, hopefully we're going to try to run another iteration this fall and keep it rolling, kind of do some similar stuff that we did on this, but also kind of an evaluation of the camping season. We thought we've had discussions with Ben and his group as well about you know, the timing and what we want to get out of it. And I think a post season, you know, evaluation, it'll be a little bit easier for some of the folks to participate because they're out of peak season, and kind of use that looking forward into the next year as well as what's going on. I think there's the potential for doing it again in the spring. We haven't got that far along yet. We wanted to get this one under our belts, see what the reception was, see if people like the content and felt like it was worthwhile to do. And it seems like it is. So we would definitely like to continue it.
Yeah, I think it definitely needs to be continued because, I mean, there's so much data. You know, you get so much value out of something that keeps going annually, like the KOA report. I mean, the value of that just keeps getting compounded every year they come out with it because, I mean, you've got all this data from the years previously, and you can really see now how the industry's grown and how much. It was great that KOA was able to get, you know, 5 years in before COVID hit, because then when COVID hit, we were able to see, you know, you can tell the impact that it had on the industry. There's like data right there. You know, you compare 2018, 2019 to 2020 and 2021, and you can see all the differences. So it's definitely valuable to keep going with. So
Definitely, we enjoy that part of it. As Mike was talking earlier, I was thinking about when you talked about when we first did it. One of the most nervous moments of my career was the second year of doing the report, to look at the results and just to see if, like, how close are these going to be? Is it like going to be blown up? Because people were saying, it's like, is this real? Is this? And it's like, okay, if we're way off base the second year, it's going to be like no one's going to ever want to see it again. So it was quite a relief to that.
When you look at this industry and not just, you know, the users of that report and all the other stuff out there now, it's the manufacturers, it's the aftermarket people, it's not just the campgrounds that are using this data. And it's, you know, 10 years ago, this was not a data-driven industry at all. Yeah. And now it seems to be, even down to that campground manager level. I mean, they're doing their own analysis on their own numbers in a totally different way, you know, and that's the tools they have at their disposal now is completely different. So I think there's a lot less seat of the pants management going on out there, and it's to everybody's benefit.
Yeah, and the KOA report definitely helped the campground industry connect with the RV industry too, to some degree, because I know every year the RV industry has Toby O'Rourke or other people from Campgrounds of America come out and speak at different events and present the data from the campground industry. And it's just really helped the RV industry kind of understand the campground industry better. And I think it goes both ways. I think the campground industry is kind of understanding the RV industry a little bit better too, which is great for both sides. So
Yeah, we both need each other, and so we should work together on it. It's good information.
I thought one of the other interesting parts was the marketing aspect on page 16 of the report. Just the overall 87% of parks use social media. I thought it was interesting that the mid-sized and large-sized parks were at 95 and 92% respectively, but then you got to the small parks and only like 79% of the people who responded used social media. I guess I just thought that everybody had a Facebook page to some degree.
They should.
At this point.
They should, but again, some people may have created one and it's just sitting there, because again, it's that time to consistently keep up the posts and to keep that going, and it has to be top of mind. So again, some people, and again, the last couple of years, a lot of people's parks have been full. They haven't probably put in that that time and effort. It's worth it. They should, and it's because it's definitely a great tool for any campground or small business really to have that presence.
Overall, I thought it was interesting. Overall, 2% use none of the marketing stuff that you guys listed. Social media, word of mouth, print advertising, emails, billboards, pop-up ads, direct mailers, and 2% of people said that they don't. 2% of respondents said they don't use any of these. So I'm just wondering how they market their parks.
So Billy, is that partly caused by the success we're having right now? Are people taking their foot off the gas a little bit?
Oh yeah, no, we could have a whole nother show about my thoughts on marketing in campground. I think everybody has heard me. I think the marketing aspect, people, you talk to them about camping shows or, marketing opportunities. They're like, I'm full. I don't need to market. I don't need to do anything. I'm already full. And it's kind of infuriating. I'm sorry to use such a harsh word, but for these people to stop marketing just because they're full. I would rather people see me as full and stay in contact with me than not do anything at all just because I am fully booked. I mean, I hardly had any sites open this July, but I was still doing as hard in my marketing as I could. And it's not just for new customers. And I think that's one of the big thing with marketing is it's not just to gain new customers. Your marketing efforts also help you retain customers. And those Facebook pages and staying in front of your customers, because everyone who sees that, unless you're doing Facebook ads, are people who already like your page. So they're either people who already stayed with you or interested in staying with you. So being active on Facebook just in general is keeping yourself in front of that customer so they're constantly thinking of you. So yes, I do, Mike, I do think that the marketing efforts have decreased because we are so busy. They feel they don't have to do it. And it's not just a budget thing, because Facebook posts don't cost anything except your time, which we don't have very much of, but it's not like, getting $1,000 ad in a camping guide or something like that, or going to a camping show. So yes, I do think that it's downgraded because of people being full.
Yeah. And I just thought it was interesting too, how, so like out of the campgrounds that use social media, Facebook is used 100% of the time. And then you can see it bleeding down into Instagram. More and more people are using Instagram, and TikTok is mentioned on there. I guess it'll be interesting to see how many different platforms park owners continue to use. I mean, it is kind of a time commitment. Billy, I guess, what do you use at your park? Do you use Instagram?
Yep, I do Facebook and Instagram, and that's something too. Like when you look at your marketing, each of your platforms should have a different message. Yeah. Instagram is more about, because it's a photo base. So what it's like to be at the park, showing people at the park, showing the park itself, the facilities you have, where Facebook might just be information wise. So I use Facebook and I use Instagram. And then I do email marketing. So those are the big things I use. And, the big things like TikTok, I think it's more bigger parks are doing that. They have a lot of employees, they have a lot of things going on, so they can have fun and do those fun type of videos. I also do YouTube and do walkthroughs of the park and things like that on YouTube, because each of these different platforms reach a different demographic of customer. So
Yeah.
if you know your customer, you know where to use your social media.
And then of course, employee training was a big deal in the survey too. That's something that park owners said that they really needed, was more employee training. It'll be kind of interesting to see how the industry kind of adapts to that. It's already adapting a little bit, but it's just extremely difficult to find employees and to get them trained, and especially for seasonal parks. Like Billy, you're up in Maine.
Yeah.
You're going to close here in another month. I guess what happens to the workers at your park when you close?
My employees come in knowing that they're only seasonal. I'm very thankful that I've had several that have come back, season after season. But most of the time it's only, 2 or 3. And so we have to start all over from scratch. And I think that those campgrounds that are saying they're having trouble with employee training, well, that's on the owners, the managers, because we have to take the time then to train these employees. So either you need to look at better training practices, or you need to look at better employee retention programs on getting your employees to come back and stay that you've already trained. So different procedures to look at.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting too that you've got the ear of managers, campground managers, with the survey, and they are also a group it's a job description that's in pretty high demand right now. I mean, people that are buying it corporately are on the hunt for good managers. Another question for next time, Scott, is, well, maybe you ought to ask the managers what their intent to stay in their current position is, because I think there's going to be a lot of headhunting going on out there for experienced managers. That's got to be the golden egg right now.
I would expect the industry itself will see a lot of churn in the next couple of years, especially whether it's at that level, ownership levels, and so on. There's a lot of we had the big disruption the last couple of years, and after that, at the tail end of any disruption like that, you're going to see a lot of changes. Yeah.
I have to imagine the pay rates for employees are also going up in the outdoor hospitality industry, especially like what Mike was talking about. If you have like these headhunters, looking for managers, I have to imagine the cost of a manager is going to go up pretty good, especially for an experienced one. So that's something park owners have to budget for too, I guess. So, but I think that's pretty much all the time we have for today. So it was great to see you, Scott and Billy, as always.
Thank you. Yeah,
Scott, are you gonna be at any conferences this year?
I probably will, but I won't know until the last minute.
I've been trying to talk him into it. So.
Well, I'm looking forward. I'm going to be out at the glamping show here in a couple weeks, and if anybody listening or watching is going, I'll be seeing people there. It should be a great time. Definitely a great conference that David Course has been growing out there. So I'm pretty excited about that. Billy, I'll see you at Arvik's Outdoor Hospitality Conference and Expo in Orlando. You can't really go wrong with Orlando. So hopefully the weather's nice. Hopefully there's not like a hurricane or something coming in. But thanks everyone for watching, and I hope you guys have a great rest of the week.
Yeah, keep up the good work, guys. This is valuable stuff.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
And for the one more thing, Ben, for the full copy of the report, you've got that link on Woodall's?
Yep, I have the link that I posted at the beginning of the show. That's a little bit of a story that goes with the survey, and then there's a link to access the full survey, and it's free to download. So feel free to check it out. So thanks everyone for tuning in, thanks Mike for remembering that plug. So, so bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.